It's Tuesday, January 12th, 2021, and this is Carrie's Brain. I'm so excited for this episode today. I got to meet up with my lovely friend Jill and hear her story of healing from addiction to opioids. I really believe that the best learning can come from hearing other stories, and there's a lot to learn from hers. So with that, let's get to it. It's story time. So welcome, Jill. I guess I shouldn't say welcome because I'm actually at your house. Right?
Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you. Just a little bit about Jill and I's relationship. I grew up in the same neighborhood as her. I got to babysit her kids occasionally and come over and clean her house sometimes. And so it's kind of like walking back in time, coming back in this house and being with you again. So Jill is going to start off today just telling us a little bit about her life growing up and how that's kind of led her to where she's at today. So Jill, welcome, and I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jill, and I am a grateful addict alcoholic in recovery. Today is 1,409 days,
Oh my goodness.
clean and sober, from any mind-altering substances.
How many years is that for the...
So on February 2nd, it will be 4 years.
That's amazing.
So yeah. I was born in Idaho Falls, lived in Ammon most of my life.
And that's Idaho.
Yeah.
For those of us
Yes.
might not be.
I lived here most of my life, besides college and a few little jaunts here and there. My mom was 42 when I was born, so I grew up with older parents. There was never any physical or verbal abuse, never any fidelity issues, never, money issues, never fighting, like even verbal fighting between my parents or really in our home. But I was born 8 years behind all of my siblings, and I always felt different.
So you were the youngest?
Yes,
Quite significantly.
Yeah. So I had a brother that was 16 years older, a brother that was 12 years older, and then my sister was 8 years older. So I kind of grew up almost maybe as an only child and felt very, very apart from, I feel like probably a good way to describe it would be like emotionally neglected. I can't imagine being a mom to a baby at 42, so I get that.
Ew.
Yeah.
I have a baby and I'm 36 and I feel like she's crawling around
a lot,
screaming out for attention.
Right.
So
and both my parents worked, so that made a big difference, a big impact on my life. I grew up in a home that was very much kind of, we just didn't talk about things really, or at least I didn't talk about things or hear really anybody talk about feelings or emotions. Or there's a book that I love. It's written by John Bradshaw, and it's called Bradshaw on the Family. And he talks about the roles in our families that we have. He talks about something called unwritten rules, and that's how I feel my home was. Unwritten rules mean it's never even really expressed, and most certainly not written down. It's just understood. Right. Things like what goes on in this house stays in this house. Like, we don't talk about our feelings and emotions.
Do you feel like that is something consistent, maybe that you've noticed with people in your own peer group? That was consistent
Absolutely.
With different households, that emotions were just not something that were really dealt with at that time? Absolutely.
And I hope this isn't jumping ahead, but one thing I've really learned is emotions, thoughts, feelings are not good or bad, right? They are what they are. And I believe that we put so much judgment on those things, but really a feeling is just a feeling and a thought is just a thought. It's the actions that cause the problems. And so if we can learn to not judge those things, right? I feel like we need to feel all of our emotions, good and, quote, bad, right? Like the happiness and the sadness.
I think that's good.
We have to feel our anger. We have to feel our anger and our resentment, but it's not okay to go throat punch someone.
Right.
Right. So I'm saying, like, those feelings are not bad. It's the actions.
Right.
And as I was kind of pondering, talking to you about this, the word unseen came up for me. I felt
how you felt.
very unseen, just kind of not important. I remember, I believe I was in about 3rd or 4th grade, and I was playing catch with a babysitter, and my mom had these amber glass by the side of the door.
Oh boy.
And I'd been told not to throw the ball toward the house, but I did, and I broke the window. And I was so upset.
Of course.
I had to call the restaurant where my parents were and had them paged because I had to tell them, because I felt like I couldn't hold that. Yeah, no cell phone.
Couldn't text them.
No. And my babysitter probably wasn't old enough to drive. I don't know. But anyway, I felt like I had to tell them, like, I couldn't hold the weight of that, right? And they just said, oh, okay. And I remember at the time, and it sounds crazy, I wanted to get in trouble, right? Like, I wanted to have a consequence for that.
Right.
To have to pay for it, or at least get grounded.
Acknowledge that you had done something wrong, or you had even done something, right?
You're right. Get grounded or something. Uh-huh. And to me, that was, we don't have time. It's okay. We'll just get it fixed. Yeah. And later in life, I learned that my dad did that, and that was his way of showing love. What that said internally to me is I was not smart enough. I was not capable enough. I was not able to handle or fix my own problems. So he had to take care of it.
Take care of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So my sister left for college when I started 4th grade, and so then I was the only one at home. And my mom had been working, she was trying to help my dad build a business. And
what did your dad do?
My dad was the distributor for Arctic Cat for the 11 Western states, and it was a lot of hours and a lot of travel. I just was kind of alone,
Yeah.
And they didn't really like me to have friends over when they weren't home. And the friends that I had, parents didn't really know my parents, so they didn't really want me to go over there. So I spent a lot of hours watching TV,
Yeah.
and just kind of waiting. And a sense of isolation for sure.
Yeah.
I learned to really like being alone, which is dangerous for people in addiction. What started with my mom as a lot of stress ended up to be a lot of problems, a lot of migraines, a lot of health problems. I believe really firmly now it was a clinical depression. 45 years ago, they didn't know, and so the doctor prescribed Valium. And she just kind of went to bed for about 3 years. And, later in her life, she would share that most days she didn't know when I came in the room if I was leaving to go to school or if I was coming home. And I remember many days kneeling by the side of her bed and begging her to eat because she was so thin. And my sister was away. I was the only child at home. Everybody was busy with their lives.
Your dad was working?
Yes. My dad was a workaholic for sure. And then my sister had her first child who had a lot of really severe health problems. And my mom sometimes spent months at a time in Utah with my sister.
Which was helpful for her to get out of bed.
Sure.
But not helpful
right.
for
and
how
so,
you felt.
Right, because all of a sudden what she couldn't or wouldn't, in my eyes, do for me, she did for my sister. So once again, I was not enough. Right? I was not important enough. I was not seen. And it's just funny looking back over life, and I regret that I did not come into recovery earlier when my kids were young. But, something as simple as when I graduated from Rick's, BYUI now, the night before graduation, they had a college graduation banquet. And all of my friends' parents, most of my friends were from California or out of state, and all of their parents were present. But mine, living in Idaho Falls, chose not to drive up for it.
Right. And for those of you who might not know or understand where those two cities are, it's about a half an hour.
Yeah.
So
about
it was kind of a big deal for you.
Right. And just, I remember calling and saying to my dad, "You're really not going to come?" And he said, "Well, we'll see you tomorrow." And that was just one more thing, right? And what I really want to emphasize, though, Carrie, is that I absolutely 100% know my parents loved me. I 100% know that they believed in me, and we all do the best that we can do as parents.
Right.
Most of us love our children and want the best for them, and the things that they did and the things that I did with my children were very unknowing. I never intentionally hurt my kids. And so time went on and I got to serve a mission in Washington, D.C. And, I realized I get to be here as me, not somebody's daughter, not somebody's sister. I get to be here as me. And so that was a whole new freedom that I had not experienced.
And for those of you that might not understand when she refers going on a mission, it's for the church that both she and I belong to, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the girls would go on a mission for a year and a half, a lot of times to a place, significantly far away from where they live. So there's not going to be a chance that you're going to know very many people on your mission. So it was really great for you to kind of get out of Jill, the person who lives in Idaho. You talked about Maurice's daughter and Janae's sister and and all of these people. And now she was just
me.
Sister Harris. Or not Sister Harris, sorry. Sister Cooley.
I was just...
No. Not that one either.
Sister Robinson.
Robinson.
I have a few last names.
Life's a process, right?
Right, for sure.
Sister Robinson.
So I served for 18 months and I came home, and one of the first days back at my church, I was asked to talk about my mission, and I saw who was to become my first husband. He had a smile, and I thought he was so handsome, and, fell in love, and got married really quickly. We met in April and we're married in August, so it was really fast.
I understand. Did pretty much the exact same thing myself.
Crazy. And my first daughter was born in November of 1989. And, things were good. My husband at the time had a history of drug and alcohol problems, but he was clean and sober when we got married. And then he was hurt on the job. And I do believe that at that time, the medical society did not say, oh, okay, hydrocodone, oxycodone, OxyContin are medical grade heroin.
Yeah.
Okay. So that led him into a spiral of relapse, which got pretty significant pretty quickly. My son was born in March of 1992, and by the time he was born, my husband was pretty lost. So Labor Day of that year, every Labor Day we had a big family reunion at this hotel in Alpine, Wyoming. We were up there that Labor Day, so my son was just a very few months old, and everybody in the family was there except for my husband. And everybody was asking. Well, I didn't want to admit, Carrie, that I had no idea where he was.
Right.
And there again, no cell phone, right? No way to know. And I didn't want to tell my entire family, who were all happily getting along. I have no idea where my husband is. And I need to backtrack. I'm sorry. When my son was 2 weeks old, I was in a car accident and started experiencing a lot of migraines, chronic migraines. So I was given pain medication. So I was sitting by the pool, and all the kids were laughing and playing, and the adults were laughing and splashing.
This is up in that...
In Alpine.
In Alpine, okay.
The sun was beautiful. I remember the sky being so blue and the sun so bright, and what should have been a really happy day was not. Once again, I felt apart from. Okay. So I had taken my pain medicine as prescribed, but my head was still hurting. And I remember thinking, I bet if I take one more, it will help. And as I was walking across the parking lot, a voice in my head, which I believe was who I call God, my Heavenly Father, was screaming to me that it was a really bad idea. But that didn't stop me, right? Because I wanted relief. So I got to the room and I took one more, went back out and felt a lot better. And then I decided, okay, so one more would just be like the perfect. And I proceeded to take 3. And I had no idea that day that I had set myself on a cycle of what would become 16 years in opiate abuse. I had no idea. And it happened just exactly that easily, just exactly that quickly, of just wanting to not feel not only the physical pain, but the emotional aloneness, the separateness of everything that was going on around me. This year, I was able to be in Alpine at an AA retreat and realizing, right, 28 years later, that I had gone through this whole process. And what a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
What a beautiful experience it was to be there and to be able to share with the group a little bit about my beginning.
That was a full circle.
Right? Full circle.
Full circle.
I love full circles.
Yeah. It's almost like a restart.
Right.
You just...
Right. So I began at that time, just right shortly after I began the road to a very painful divorce. It was, threats on my life, court case after court case.
Threats from him on your life, or?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, my ex-husband's father was involved with some people, and there was a hit put on my life.
Oh, word.
And so my family and I got to leave the state, my father, my mother, myself, and my kids, for several weeks without letting anybody know where we were.
Okay.
It was kind of a crazy time. Yeah, it was kind of crazy.
A lot to deal with.
Yeah, it was. So then my divorce again was final. This is ironic too. Then my divorce was final in April of '94. And I married my second husband in August of '94, which I thought was going to be full circle, but it only, it wasn't.
Maybe like a half circle.
Okay, so at this point, I'm taking the pain medicine. I'm feeling, and I'm having to take more. Okay, the doctor was still prescribing it, right? So I wasn't aware. Yeah. And then I was on hydrocodone. And then this great new drug came out called Ultram, which is now Tramadol. And it was supposed to be a non-narcotic, non-addictive. So he was giving that to me very freely. My anxiety was bad, so he gave me Xanax. I couldn't sleep, so he gave me Ambien.
Oh.
I was on a lot but it was all doctor prescribed, right? So and I still had a recommend.
To think anything more of it other than my doctor is giving this to me.
And he knows
I'm
best.
Taking it.
And he
I
knows
trust
best.
Him.
Yes.
Right.
And it's working, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I was still active in church. I was still a good mom. I was PTO president. I was the room mom.
Yeah.
Everything, right? Like I had my life together from the outside. I remarried, and as I said, that was an adjustment. He had 2 children from a former marriage, so all of a sudden I have 4 children, which we had his 2 girls most of the time. So it was just this whole learning curve kind of got doubled.
Yeah.
And I think as women, we have this feeling, and I don't know if it is just a feeling or if it is something that we are taught. I don't know if it came from my home, but I really believe that if I didn't give everything I had to everybody and make sure everybody was okay, and I wasn't supposed to think about me. I wasn't supposed to realize that I was absolutely exhausted. Right? That was selfish. Meeting my own needs was selfish and self-centered and most certainly not Christ-like. Right? Never mind the Bible stories that we read about Christ going off to recoup, right?
Right.
That was selfish. And I was supposed to be everything to everybody all the time.
Right.
And that's the way I felt. And Carrie, I remember taking those pills and thinking, I am a better mother because of these. Because this takes the edge off my nerves.
Right.
Right?
I'm not going to snap at someone or
exactly.
do something wrong or not be able to do the bake sale or maybe fall asleep when I'm in the middle of helping someone with homework or something. Like just absolutely, normal.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what a lot of people don't realize is the brain of an addict, the body of an addict has an allergy, which is an abnormal reaction, right? Where people have babies or have broken arms and they take a pain pill and it knocks them out. For me, that gets me going, right?
Okay.
Right. Like I could go, if I had pain pills on board, I could stay up and only get 2 or 3 hours of sleep, which meant my house could be spotless, all the meals could be homemade, everything, the laundry could be done and ironed, and everything was in order all the time. And I was fine without sleep. People say, oh, I took one and it made me feel really weird. I'm like, well, you idiot, you have to take 6.
Yeah, that's not how it works.
And so that's just the way, that's the way it works. And what I didn't understand too at the time is that when my body, when it gets used to having that, my body will actually create pain so that I will take more pain medication, because that's the craving, right? The physiological craving.
Yeah.
And so the more pain medicine I took, the more I needed to take. What I didn't understand is the brain and the body of an addict really does process things differently. And if we have time, remind me to tell you my little funny story about Facebook.
Okay.
My life was really happy. I mean, I wasn't working. I got to be a stay-at-home mom. As I said, I was like the PTO president. I held auxiliary callings in our church.
You were my leader, I'm sure. At some point you had to have been.
Right.
Because I remember coming over here for hair things.
Right.
Hair night or something.
And I held pretty significant callings. I did everything that moms do. But I remember, Carrie, when I very first came into recovery, I felt like I could breathe. And I don't know if you have ever experienced that, but I felt like I was almost in constant trauma. I felt like in my mind, I felt like I was juggling like a million balls. And if one of them dropped, like the whole world was going to come crashing down. Right? Like if I let one chink in my armor, everything was going to fall apart. So you've advanced down the road. My second husband and I had been married 10, 12-ish years, and my father passed away. And that my dad had been my hero, right? I would often say my dad was the one person who was an unconditional love in my, like he always felt like a safe spot. And so when he died, that I lost myself. I would get up in the morning maybe and get my kids off to school and then go back to bed until they came home. And I just experienced a depression at a level that nothing could help. And I believe that we all have dark spots in our life, but clinical depression is very different. And I experienced that underneath, and so I never want to come across as saying people shouldn't take medicines for depression or stuff that they need. But there is a difference between being sad and being clinically depressed. So the kids, my son was 13 at the time and my daughter was 16. I remember telling my daughter that her dad had left. They wouldn't come out to say goodbye, and she said, "You just cost me 2 dads." And that was really painful, right? Because at that point, I had no fault. It was him walking out. He found somebody else, and it was him. I think another thing, too, that I did not realize is that the typical age of beginning of addiction is usually 12 to 14.
My word.
And it seems really young. But if you think about that's really middle school, which is one of the hardest points of anyone's life.
That's true.
And the search to fit in and feel a part of. So for me, the first time I ever really felt peace, I guess, almost would be when I started to use pain pills. Like, it quieted everything down. And so most people in addiction or alcoholism say the first time they ever experienced that was the first time they ever felt like they felt inside of what they thought everybody else felt like, right? They felt, quote unquote, normal.
Right.
But Kelsey soon started college down at Weber State. My son began to deteriorate. I knew he was smoking pot, and I didn't know that he was really drinking much, but I knew that. But he was only, he was like, by this time, like had started in the earlier high school. And it was just a phase. And he would outgrow it, and not, don't make too much of it.
Right.
And his
dad. If you harp on him too much, then
right. Sure.
Just make it worse.
You got to
want to do it more or something.
Focus on the positive.
Yes.
And the unconditional love piece.
Yeah.
I did not have any clue what unconditional love was, because to me, unconditional love was being there no matter what, supporting them no matter what, loving them no matter what, and those are important components, but that's not all there is, right? So he began to get kind of in some trouble, and he was first arrested when he was 18, and it was a minor thing. I had been praying, really praying for a miracle for him because I saw him getting worse and worse. And so he was arrested. And so this wonderful mom, the first thing I did was call an attorney, and the second thing I did was call a bail bondsman, right? Because I had to get him. I loved him, you know.
Right.
His dad. He has
deal
dad
with any pain.
Right.
He's had all these things in his life, so you got to be there for him.
Right. Right. And I think that when my ex-husband left, because by this time he had legally adopted the kids, and that's the only dad they knew was my second husband.
Your second husband, right?
And so I wanted them to really know that I was here, that I'd always be here, right? And so I had to save him. And then he went to jail again, and I did the same thing, right? I bailed him out. And I had a really dear friend tell me a painful thing. She said, "Jill, you pray for miracles. You pray for something, but you don't like the way it looks. So you jump in and rearrange the pieces, and then immediately get back on your knees and start praying for a miracle." And she was pretty blunt with me. She said, "You either need to stop praying for a miracle or get the hell out of God's way when he puts one in your life." Right?
Ooh.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I didn't like it at all. But my son continued to get worse. Then he started to experience more legal problems. The addiction was more present, and I was losing him. I was losing him. You know, physically not so much, but he was not. He was not the boy, the person I knew. That person was
gone.
Unreachable. So he agreed to go to treatment at an inpatient center called Renaissance Ranch in Draper, Utah, and it's a faith-based treatment program. And he experienced some really great healing there. By this time I had been attending our church's 12-step meetings, and I thought that I kind of knew, because I like to think that I know a lot.
Yeah.
And the more I learn, the less I know, so I know I'm getting smarter, if that makes sense. But I went down
of all these nice little things, aren't you?
right, yeah. So I went down for the first parents' night, and they were doing a class, and the presenter, her name is Chris, and she's phenomenal, was giving, and so I kept commenting, and she said to me, she said to me, "Hey, can you stay after for a minute?" And so all the parents are leaving, and I'm just kind of waiting, and she comes up to me and, just kind of looks at me and says, "Hey, are you going home to Idaho tonight? Are you going back to Idaho?" I said, "Yeah, I am." She goes, "Oh, could you do me a favor?" And so I thought I was teacher's pet, right? She knows how much I know because she's already asking me to do a favor. And I said, "Absolutely." She said, "Would you stop and buy a shovel on your way home?" And then she turned and walked out of the room.
Oh.
And I remember just kind of it's like time froze because I was trying to figure out what I missed.
Yeah.
So I'm putting my stuff in my bag, and then she walks back in the door and she said, when you get home, I want you to dig a grave. Then I want you to come back here and pick up your son. And I want you to drive him home and put him in the grave and bury him. Because you are literally loving your son to death. The way you are loving him is killing him, and he's going to die if you do not change. And I couldn't speak, Carrie. I couldn't speak. And I got in because the truth of that, sometimes when the truth hits us, it takes our breath.
Yeah.
And I got into the car, and that 5-hour drive home, I sobbed the entire way. And I pled with God to forgive me and to teach me because I had been so wrong.
And it's tough because that feels like what the natural thing to do is to love someone when they're in such a hard time. And we're going to talk about this book, Unhooked, in a little bit, and just how incredibly, unfortunately, it's the wrong response.
Absolutely.
And how hard it is to give the appropriate response. So.
Well, and just real quickly, I think it's kind of what Christ says, love the sinner, not the sin. Mm-hmm. You have to love the addict without loving their actions, without approving or enabling. And by now too, I had stepped back from my own abuse. Like when my husband my second husband left, I looked at my life and I realized things were falling apart and I had to stop. And so I did. I went to my doctor. I said, I just need a very limited amount for my chronic migraines. I don't want to take Ambien anymore for sleep. So we switched to something way lighter, cut my pain medication. So at the time I was on about 350 hydrocodone 10 a month and about 400 tramadol a month and 2 milligrams of Xanax and between 10 and 20 milligrams of Ambien.
When you say 400
tablets.
Right.
So, I mean, you do the math.
I was trying, but
well, it's easy to say it's
tough
more
for
than
my mom brain to do.
Right.
But
okay, so you have to realize it was more
a lot.
Yes.
Definitely more than.
Well, for sure, because
it's
it's
reasonable.
Well, it's more than 10 pain pills plus more than 10 tramadol. So probably an average of 20 pain pills a day of a mixture, plus the Xanax, plus the Ambien.
Right.
So I was not abusive at that point. I did keep it in limited quantities. But so I had stepped back from a lot of that. And the fallacy in my thinking was addicts can't quit on their own. And I've quit, even though I really hadn't. I was managing, right?
Right.
So I'm not an addict. So I didn't recognize that I needed help. And I think, too, unfortunately, there's such a stigma based on people with addiction and alcoholism. And many people, and I believe especially many religious people, feel that it's the people under the bridge, it's the people who've lost their teeth, it's the people who can't hold a job, it's the ones that always have domestic violence calls to their home. And my experience, especially in our church, which is a very church that teaches no drugs or alcohol, I worked in our church 12-step program, and in 1 year we filled 27,000 seats that year in a town of about 80,000. So, and that's church members. Now granted, some people came every week. Still, I'm saying there's a huge need for all walks of life.
And an understanding within religious communities.
Absolutely.
As well.
Absolutely. And I don't think the Church of Jesus Christ has a market on non-understanding of addiction by any means.
Right.
And I think it's a real big fallacy also that we can pray it away, right? Like if I pray for my child, they're going to stop. If I pray for my husband, he's going to stop drinking. Right. If I just love them and pray, it's all going to go away. And if there's truly an addiction present, that just does not work.
Right.
That just does not work. Medical intervention is needed. Yeah. And what happens too is like all the things that worked for me, all the things of being able to give me more patience, all the things of having more energy, they all stop working. And then the desperation sinks in, right? I've taken all that I dare take today, but I feel like I'm going to choke the crap out of somebody if I don't take more, and it's not working. I'm angry, I'm irritated, I'm fearful, I'm frustrated, I'm exhausted. Yeah. And at some point they stop, and that's when the drugs turn on you, right? And so then, fast forward a few years, and my son had continual problems. He did not stay clean and sober after treatment. He went through an additional outpatient treatment and still was not able to stay clean. And the legal problems continued. And so he ended up in a specialty court. For those of you who don't know what that is, a drug court is like a supervised, pretty stringent program where they have to complete a lot of recovery things, and they have random urine tests, and they have to report to probation, and it's really designed to help people get some clean and sober time while they're on paper and being trapped. So he was in a specialty court and was doing really well. He started to get less restrictions, and I saw some things that scared me. And so as his mom, still not healthy mom, I needed to intervene, right? And so I reached out to a relative who works in the specialty court and said, hey, I'm worried about my son, and da-da-da. And so then we're having this whole text conversation, which I'm assuming is a familial conversation, between family members. Because I was giving some pretty explicit details and most certainly my feelings which were on steroids because I hadn't really been healthy, you know. And so on Mother's Day of 2017, my son came over, and my Heavenly Father, God kept telling me, you need to tell him what you did. And I'm like, no, that's not a good idea.
I don't want him to know.
You know,
Just trying to be helpful.
Right. It's been 2 months. He's never going to find out.
Yeah.
I don't need to tell him. And it just kept over and over. And I'm like, no. So that following Tuesday, so 2 days later, Tuesday afternoon, he called me at work and he said, Mom, what did you do? And I just kind of sat there. And I knew it was coming. And I will never forget, like, the context of our conversation, which was, don't ever doubt my love for you. You're a great mom. You've done a lot for me, and I recognize that. I'm trying to live a life, being clean and sober, and I can't do that if you're a part of it. Please don't call me. Don't text me. Don't drop by my house. Don't send me letters. Don't ask about me. I don't want anything to do with you. I can't have anything to do with you. And what I can tell you is I have never experienced a physical pain like that. Childbirth, coming off opiates, nothing ever hurt to that level. And I spent almost 2 days on my bathroom floor, and I remember feeling that must be the closest thing to Gethsemane I would ever experience. For the first time ever, I realized 100% that my actions and my behaviors had done damage far beyond drugs and alcohol. That his use of drugs and alcohol and mine had not caused the damage to the relationship that my behaviors had. And I want to circle back just a little bit, talking about behaviors. So when I checked my son into rehab, my daughter was at Weber State and telling me how great life was, right? She was happy, she was involved, she had friends, always doing activities, and Kelsey's a bundle of joy. Jackson has been my teacher in life, and Kelsey has been my light. She is a phenomenal person, and we have always been very close. So I'm hearing from her how great life is. And I was sitting at work one day, and my phone rang, and I picked it up, and the person on the other end of the phone said, "This is the Ogden City Police Department, and we're calling to inform you that we're in transit to McCady Hospital with your daughter. She's made a suicide attempt by drug overdose." And I honestly don't remember anything after that for hours. The next thing I remember was walking into the emergency room with her in a straitjacket. I believe that, to me, she looked whiter. Her complexion looked more pale than the white bed sheets. And she said to me, the first thing she said to me was, "I'm so sorry, Mom." There again, my behavior. And in the next few days, that she had to spend several days in a lockdown psychiatric ward, and I was only able to see her an hour a day. But those hour visits were very informative and very enlightening. And I did at one point ask her why. And she said, "Mom, I saw how hard you were struggling with Jackson. I was supposed to be the good child." She didn't want to add to my pain. And what I realized at that point, in those few days, I stayed in a room adjacent to McCady, and I had a lot of hours on my own. What I realized is the far-reaching effects of my own addictive behaviors. You know, the food, the shopping, the escape into television, the, at that point, exercise, although I never know it now, All those ways I used to escape. Carrie, I never, ever sat by my child, any of them, and said, what you're feeling is real. This pain is hard, but I'm going to sit with you in it. Because I didn't even deal with my own pain. I did not even sit in my own uncomfortable emotions. I ran from them in any way possible. And in so doing, I failed to model for my children how to deal with hard things in life. And so naturally, they sought ways of escape that worked for them. And Kelsey now is a mother of 4 children, and she just had a baby on Monday, and she is just doing well. She's worked hard at her marriage. She's successful. She's healthy. She's done a lot of work to heal.
Yeah, when you were talking with me the other day, you were telling me how well he's doing, that he's just happily married, he's doing well in his profession, and he just gets so much joy out of hunting and being in the outdoors, and you're just so proud of where he's at.
Absolutely. And
so would you say that was the point in your life where you had hit the bottom?
When I had my son, when I had that conversation with my son, and he said, that in addition to that experience with my daughter made me realize I did not really understand that you could feel emotional pain so physically.
Yeah.
Because I literally could not get off the bat. I threw up and I cried and I threw up and I pled. I've never pled with God more sincerely than I did. And the only answer he gave was for me to call Dave Pinniger, who is someone that I had met when my son was in treatment and I had become friends with. I called him, and after 4 minutes and 57 seconds of complete silence, he suggested in some words I'm not going to use that I needed treatment.
So you told him what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
He had that time to think, and then he laid it
He let out this huge breath, said, you need to call another family member named Shane, who's also been years in and out of addiction. You need to call him and tell him everything you just told me, and you need treatment, and I will see you in the morning. And he hung up. And I just, Carrie,
people like to do that to you, don't they?
Right? And all I wanted was for him to say, "Oh, it's okay. Everybody makes mistakes."
Yeah, but that's not what you needed to hear.
No, and that's the gift of people in recovery is we value. My most important critical friends in my life are the ones who love me enough to tell me the truth, even though they know it's going to make me mad. Right. So
when you say the gift, I feel like I remember that from the book. There's something.
Oh, for sure. And that's why I always.
It's more of a gift than maybe calling a bail bondsman or getting a lawyer.
Yes.
Or, taking them out for ice cream even.
Right. And so I began treatment on May 30th, 2017. That was the first night I walked into group. And I walked into a room, and Dave's only condition for me to get into treatment was that I follow every suggestion and that I not contact my son at all unless I personally talked to Dave and got okay. And to be honest. Okay, so I walked into my first meeting at Renaissance Ranch, Idaho Falls, which was an intensive outpatient program, which means you still have your job, right? You still do all that stuff, but you have intensive amounts of. So for me, I had 3-hour groups 3 nights a week, plus a 1-hour counseling session and a 1-hour recovery coach session. So I walked in to my first treatment group that night and sat in a room there were 16 people, including myself, and I'd never met any of them. And I proceeded to say, "Hi, I'm Jill. I'm an addict. I've been in opiate addiction. I've experienced 16 years in opiate addiction. I've stolen people's medicine. I've forged prescriptions. I've doctor shopped. I've pharmacy shopped, I've lied, I've cheated, I've stolen, I've done things that are so far past anything I ever thought that I would do. I've done things so opposite of the woman that I want to be just to get through. And I felt at the time that I was going to hear gasps. And when I looked around, you know what I saw? I saw people looking at me. Right. Just exactly how you're looking at me now. And that's the pain of the disease of addiction, is that we feel less than, we feel unworthy, we feel like, and especially if you're like me, active in church, we feel like we're the only one.
Right.
That everybody else has a perfect family, a perfect marriage, is the perfect mother who handles everything.
Yeah.
And the disease of addiction and alcoholism is so isolating. And if there's anything that we know, it's that the opposite of addiction is connection. Today, the most biggest gift in my life is my addiction. And that's why I say I'm a grateful addict and alcoholic in recovery. I am so grateful for my addiction and my alcoholism, because that's what truly brought me to God. That's what truly brought me to myself. Without the substance part that caused my life to fall apart, I never would have gotten well. I believe there are so many people who only have what I call the isms. And so alcoholism is a two-part disease: the alcohol or the drugs, right? And that's the substance. And so many people are under the fallacy, if you just quit drinking, if you just quit smoking pot or whatever, then you're going to be well.
It's done.
And especially as unknowing people who live in fear, right? The alcohol is the problem, but it's not. It's the solution, right? The book that we're going to talk about in a minute was written by one of my dear friends, Jason Coombs, and I had the opportunity this summer to host him here. I do Narcotics Anonymous meetings in my backyard in the summer, and he spoke. And he shared an analogy that I got his permission to share with you, and he talked about holding our breath. That, we can hold our breath, and if we practice a lot, we can hold it for longer. And, elite athletes can really hold their breath for quite a bit of time. And he compared that to our addiction, right? Like, we want to stop drinking, we want to stop using, and we can do that. And sometimes we can get like a pretty significant amount of time clean and sober. But if we don't do the recovery, the emotional side of the work, if we don't work on the isms, just like our body will kick in and we will breathe again, our body will kick in, our mind will kick in, and we will use again.
Right.
And that's what I didn't understand, because I had almost 10 years out of active abuse before I went into treatment. But I had not done the emotional work. And so on page 52 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about the isms, that part of the disease. And it says, we were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. So that's where I was living. And it's worse. If there's any dry addicts or alcoholics out there, get help, because it's worse. Because we have all the same, I'm sorry, but the same shit going on inside of ourselves with nothing to numb it, right? And so I went into treatment. I was accepted. I worked through the program. I graduated May 30th, 2018. My counselor called me and said, do you realize that you're graduating from a 6-month program a year to the date?
Good job, Jill.
When you started, I'm a slow learner. But in there I was able to meet some of the most beautiful people. Jason, that wrote this book, was one of the house managers when my son was inpatient. And, you and I have talked a little bit in preparation. I believe this book Unhooked is for everybody.
And so I will have in the description the link to this book, and it's going to go straight to the place that is actually going to, like, you could get it on Amazon. Like, I got a little excited and when Jill recommended it to me, and I bought it on Kindle, but all the proceeds go to, can you explain that?
Yeah, for sure. So all the proceeds from Jason's book, and it's also coming out on Audible, like really soon, all the proceeds, 100% of the proceeds go to sponsor people who need treatment and can't afford it. Right. And it's not exclusive to his treatment center. They've helped other people in other treatments too.
So I'm not going to be linking it to Amazon. I'm going to be linking it to the place
To Jason.
that will provide the most money for people who are going to need treatment. So just keep that in mind when you're looking for this book, and consider spending a couple extra bucks so that it can go to the right place.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. But so Jason was, really, his story is really, really profound.
Oh, I really believe that you can learn a lot from other people's stories. And I don't personally have someone in my life that is dealing with this kind of magnitude of addiction with drugs. And as I was reading this book, I thought, everybody needs to read this book. Everyone needs to hear this man's story because it's crazy. And
Yep, it is.
It's amazing to see his change and where he is at now and the good that he is doing.
Right.
It's so beautiful and it is so inspiring. Everybody needs to read this book. And I feel like the things that it teaches you are just incredibly helpful in your everyday life, in preparation. I mean, you never know when you're gonna need to be the person to give that gift that you talked about.
Right. Right. And too, Carrie, the thing that we talked a little bit before too, and I believe people look at as addiction, drugs and alcohol. But what I have really come to understand through this whole process of first working through it from the Al-Anon, or the parent of an addicted, because that's where I started.
That's a helpful word for people to know, because it was hard for me in the book. I'm like, who the heck is Al-Anon?
Okay, so Alcoholics Anonymous is for alcoholics. Okay. Al-Anon is for the families, the spouses, the children, etc. of alcoholics. So it's a sister program.
Okay, that'll help you all when you're reading this book. You're going to be like, I get it now. It's not like QAnon. I just kept thinking, like, is this some sort of a crazy group that I don't know about?
It's a sister program. And actually, Bill Wilson started Alcoholics Anonymous, and his wife, Lois, started Al-Anon. Okay. Right, because as parents or spouses or children, we don't know where to go. Right. And so we help in the wrong ways.
Right, what you were talking about.
For sure.
With the lawyers.
For sure. And two, I think that we tend to think of addiction as like I said, the substances. For me, I've come to understand that addiction is actually anything I chronically use to run away from hard feelings. Right. And my brain, as the brain of an addict, thinks differently. So I mentioned my Facebook story. So I went into treatment in May of 2017, and I decided in June that I was going to go off Facebook for 30 days. Okay. Because I'm sure Facebook, I was kind of scared because I'm pretty sure they would collapse without me.
Oh,
but
sure.
I decided to do it anyway. Okay. So I made a commitment to my recovery coach. Okay. This is something that I'm going to sacrifice. Because at the time I was also working 2 jobs, right? So it was time. So all of a sudden, the first weekend of June, I realized, oh my gosh, my birthday's in June. So that little thought starts.
Everybody's gonna be wishing you happy birthday.
Right. So
that
little thought starts. Crap! I'm gonna be off Facebook for my birthday. People are gonna be messaging me for my birthday. That's the second thought, right?
Just get on one,
right? And that's it. And then and then the third thought is, if people send me all these messages and I don't thank them, they're going to be insulted.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So this is this whole thought process, right? And so I decided, okay, well, I can just get on for my birthday. Yeah. But I'd made a commitment, remember?
Right.
So I went to treatment and I talked to my counselor and I explained just what we've talked about. And she said, oh, I understand. So do you think maybe you better go to the bar because it's your birthday? And people might buy you drinks because it's your birthday. And if you refuse the drinks, that's going to insult them because they're buying you a birthday. And so it just is crazy, right? And it's crazy. Like my kids, Carrie, when I went through my second divorce, I came home from work and I turned on the TV and I fell asleep to the TV. And I woke up the next morning many times in the same clothes that I had worked in. That was my escape. But also, nobody thought bad of me.
Yeah.
Right? But guess what? I was not there for my kids.
Yeah. It's like the whole Netflix and chill thing.
For sure.
Minus
for sure.
the Netflix at the time,
Right,
probably.
right.
But,
Well,
Yeah.
but see, at that time I wasn't really abusing drugs or alcohol.
Right.
At all. No alcohol. In fact, I hadn't drank for years and years, and that's a whole nother story. But we can escape in ways, but if I'm not present in my life, like Alcoholics Anonymous says you keep your head where your feet are, right? Like live right here in this moment, live right here. I say be where your butt is.
Oh, I like that better. Be where your butt is.
I know. See that more people get that.
Yeah.
But if I'm using even exercise, shopping is a huge one. Food is huge.
Yeah.
Those means of escape.
Phones.
Yeah, for sure. But those are addictions if we use them improperly, right?
Right.
And people can laugh and joke and say, "Oh yeah, I have a sugar addiction." Well, if that's what you chronically turn to escape, and you're not. And that's what you're modeling, especially modeling for your children. Oh, you've had a really hard day. Let's go get ice cream.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't get asked to the prom. Let's go buy you some really cute clothes.
Yeah,
We're teaching. We're not sitting with them. We're not saying, you know what? There was times when I didn't get asked to the prom and it really feels awful.
Yeah.
And you know
breathe.
what? Right? And what you're feeling is, and validate. What you are feeling is real.
And it's okay.
And it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go slash his tires.
Right.
But you can think he's a jerk and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? Because I was never told that in my home.
Yeah.
I was raised, and I think we all kind of were. The anger is bad.
Right.
Right? If you have faith, you won't have fear. And I don't believe that any longer because I think I can have great faith in God and still have times of fear.
Yeah. Be a little scared.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Marianne Williamson says, with every thought we think, we either manifest our faith in fear or we manifest our faith in love. And so now, when I feel fearful, instead of saying, I must not be close enough to God because I'm feeling fear, I think, I remember the time when somebody did this for me and I felt so much love. Or I remember when I was able to show love toward another. And instead of switching from making fear and faith opposite, when I get fearful, I think of love. And it goes away without the guilt. That's something that works for me.
Yeah.
But in this book, the book Unhooked, Jason talks about not only the addict side, which it was really important for me as a mom to go to sources that I was not emotionally attached to. Mm-hmm. Because when my son was in addiction, to be honest, I was angry. I was angry that I couldn't fix it mostly. I felt a lot of shame. And later what I realized, I did not feel shame at my son. I felt ashamed of myself because prior to my experiences, I would have thought, where is his mother?
Right.
What is going on in their home that he's doing those things?
What's their problem?
Right? So I was ashamed of me, not him. Mm-hmm. But this enables, you read the story and it enables you to see the true process of addiction, the true suffering of the disease without being emotionally attached to the person.
Right.
And it also has phenomenal help and guidance for parents, for anyone who wants to help an addict.
Yeah. He talks about putting on the emotional raincoat. Mm-hmm. And I love that because as a parent, it is not easy to put on an emotional raincoat. And basically what that means is just letting their crap slide off of you. Mm-hmm. And I really love that analogy. Oh, so helpful in so many different ways. it's a beautiful book.
It is, and I didn't realize at the time, because we never know. But I was with his parents in parent group,
Oh,
and so and they're so great, and I'm thankful that they love me.
that's interesting.
I know. I'm thankful. I'm really thankful that they love me because I bet they just want to I bet they just want to say, "Oh, honey," because they had several years, right? I bet they just, "Oh, honey."
Yeah.
But there's just so much helpful information. But I think too, one thing that's so important for people who have addiction, I thought that maybe I could pray my way out. And I thought for sure that if I studied and learned, I could get my way out of it. One of the very first, most powerful things my counselor said to me is, alcoholism and addiction is a disease of feelings. Our feelings, our emotions that we don't know how to deal with, bring us to this disease. And for us, drugs and alcohol are a solution, right?
Right.
I had noise in my head all of the time. And when I was under the influence, that noise got quiet. That screaming, "You're not worthy, you're not good enough, you'll never measure up," for a time it stopped. And I could sit in peace. But it is a disease of escaping feelings and emotions, and therefore we have to be willing to use our feelings and emotions to escape the disease. Right? We have to be willing to go to the hard places. We have to be willing to look internally at ourselves. One oxymoron that I really love is, the more I'm trying to control outside of me, the less control I have inside of me. Right? When I feel like I'm falling apart inside, I want to fix everything. I want my house to be perfect.
Oh, yes.
I want the dinner to be perfect. And all that I'm trying to do, really. And I'm not saying those things aren't important. I mean, it's nice to cook a nice dinner. It's nice to have a clean house. But when I'm going excessively,
You have to really feel inside what's going on.
Yes.
And not just, okay, I mean, like, yes, I am a clean person or, but it is good to consistently have that reflection on yourself.
Absolutely.
And think about, okay, what did I do today? What are these behaviors like? Why am I doing, I really am fascinated in understanding why people do the things that they do, why I do the things that I do, because it's important, right? Because sometimes you'll find this thing that I'm doing is dumb and I don't need to do it.
right?
Or maybe this other thing that I'm not doing could be beneficial.
Sure.
So if you can get rid of this thing in your life, then you have room for the thing that's actually going to be helpful.
Well, and I love that I've learned I don't really think of things black and white or right and wrong very much anymore. I ask myself, is this working? Is this working to make my life better? Is this moving me toward a direction I want to grow into? Or is this causing me discomfort and dis-ease and inner turmoil?
Yeah.
And, work to eliminate those things. But yeah, it's a beautiful life. And what I can say is, there was a time when I was married to my second husband. Like I said, I had everything, right? I had a great marriage. I had great kids. I would stay at home. I had insurance. I had financial security, all those things. But what I can tell you is post what I've gone through, and almost 4 years now, I have a life I never dreamed possible. I used to sit in the rooms of recovery and hear people talk about the lives they had, and I thought, that is so great for you. That will never be my life. And I'm still single. I struggle financially. I don't have health insurance. My children, my son is still struggling. But Carrie, I have a peace beyond anything I ever knew possible. In the midst of chaos and turmoil and all this COVID, I have felt peace. I have felt trust. I have felt trust not only with myself, but with God. I ask myself constantly, in the big book it says, God is everything or God is nothing. Which will you choose? And I ask myself that multiple times a day. And I choose that my God is everything to me. And therefore, if he's everything, even in the turmoil, He is there.
Yeah.
And I just am so grateful for the life that Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous has given to me. And if you're out there struggling, it's scary. And I get it. Like, I totally get how scary it is. But reach out, because there are people who have been where you are who want to help you get to where they have become. So thank you so much for making time for me today,
Yes.
for letting me share my story.
Absolutely.
And onward and upward.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Jill.